passionate. And then finally, particularly for libertarians, what are her positions on the Commerce Clause? Is she going to be a justice who sees the Commerce Clause as basically encompassing everything, which means that there's no limitation at all on government power in terms of what the federal government can be involved in? And how is she going to interpret the General Welfare Clause? I mean, is she going to interpret it as meaning that anything the government does to hand out more money and give more welfare to people as being covered under the General Welfare Clause? I want to get your reactions to this whole thing around the Supreme Court nominee, but I think it's important to point out that as libertarians, for us, a Supreme Court nominee shouldn't be this big of a deal. It shouldn't be something that dominate headlines. It should be a big lightning rod that should have big political inquiries and big hearings, because for us, the role of a Supreme Court justice is actually very neatly defined. It's to interpret and imply the Constitution, not make up new meanings of the Constitution, not read something that says Congress shall make no law but say in case this or in case that. We believe in a pretty literal interpretation of the Constitution.
Correct. And one of the things that concerns me is her position on activism, which I don't know where she gets that authority from within the Constitution, because there's no mention of it. But one of the things that you mentioned I find ironic is that during this debate there's no mention of the Constitution regarding her candidacy. And one of the things that she did was when she was a law professor, she was engaged in banning or preventing military folks from coming on Harvard's property. Now, the reason why that's interesting from a libertarian perspective is because from a constitutional perspective and contract law, we respect personal property rights. So if she wants to argue it from a personal property right protection perspective, hey, that may be something that we could agree with her on. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, far too often when these discussions have taken place, they're taken from the perspective of individual opinions as opposed to the rule of law and the Constitution.
Yeah, absolutely well put. Phil, are you looking forward to this debate about the Supreme Court hearing and this whole process?
I've already been involved in the debate, and unfortunately, most people aren't concerned about whether she values the Constitution. They say, oh, she plays softball. Does she like men? And I'm like, I'm more worried about if she likes the Constitution. And I realize Harvard is probably a good school, but I'm kind of tired of seeing Harvard and Yale dominate the top offices of government. It'd be nice to see representatives that represent the rest of the country. There's 50 states. They aren't all centered in Northeast America.
And this is an interesting split in terms of the court right now. If she does get approved, and that the entire court will be from kind of educated one geographical part of the country and frankly kind of cut from the same cloth in a lot of ways. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and go to our next slide because we have another state issue that I think is very topical for folks, and it deals with our current governor, Charlie Crist.
Before we move on, just really quick, I wanted to kind of follow up on what you just mentioned with Kerrigan. The real issue there is this whole idea that's developed. It's probably more of a recent phenomenon. It's probably been there, but it's taken hold over the last few years. It's this elitist mentality in which you have a lot of smart, educated people who believe that they know what's right and best for everyone, and they can control and dictate what individuals need to do. Unfortunately, they exempt themselves from the same things that they impose upon us. But we really, need to move away from this elitist mentality and how they want to direct society and get back to the fundamental principle of liberty and the Constitution. And quite frankly, I don't see the Constitution mention anything about elitism and direction and individuals in their qualification to direct the country. As a matter of fact, there should be no direction. It should be liberty, and individuals through their own personal life and decision making. That's how eventually they shape and direct the direction the country should take.
Absolutely right, and there are a lot of people talking about kind of this rise of the elites, if you will, and I think it is an unfortunate movement. Absolutely right. Well, speaking of elites or wannabe elites, let's talk about our current governor, Charlie Crist. We do have an overhead that we're going to put up about this. He's decided to run as an independent. And our friend Rich Lowry in the National Review lumped Charlie Crist and Arlen Specter from Pennsylvania's run together, and he dubbed it the revolt of the principleless, meaning basically politicians who have no principles at all, who will basically run for cover and will find any strategy, any technique that possibly can keep them in power. He, of course, Governor Crist has repeatedly said he wasn't going to run as an independent. But in terms of losing the Republican base, where do we begin? His enthusiastic embrace of President Obama, his supporting of the economic stimulus, the energy policies and things that he's rolled out that are completely unrealistic, they're no way to be actually obtained. vetoing the very recent education bill that was sponsored by conservatives in the Florida House. And my question really is, what is a moderate anyway? I don't know about you folks, but I get frustrated when people say, I don't vote for the party, I vote for the man. Well, when they say that to me, what they're saying is they're giving license to a politician to flip-flop, to waver, to take stand A one day, stand B the next day. When we elect a politician, you need to elect somebody who has a philosophical guiding principle so that you know how he or she is going to vote on the issues. That's the only way you can intelligently class a vote. So when people say we need people that are more moderate, I actually disagree pretty strongly with that.
Correct, because we've elected a lot of moderates and we've been moderately losing all our liberties over the past few years. So I don't understand what moderate means. But we should absolutely, for sure, elect individuals based on their principles. And far too often, individuals do not discuss their principles, because when you do, you have to get into issues of, well, what are those principles based on? What are the foundations of those principles? And in my case, that comes from the Constitution at least. So we have these basically popularity contests every time people run for office. No one discusses any issue. They don't talk about the Constitution. They don't talk about their principles. They don't talk about their philosophy when it comes to government. And unfortunately, this is a disservice to the public, and we keep getting the same thing that happens, whether it be the Republican Party or the Democrat Party. It's the same situation that happens every election cycle. And I think right now people are extremely fed up and frustrated with it, which is why you see different movements as taxpayers concerned, whether it be the Tea Parties and so forth, because people are tired of it and they want real change. And basically they're on the path of ousting individuals at this point. And that's why you see Senator Bennett just got ousted in the Republican primary. And he seems to be adopting the Charlie Crist model, or at least considering running as an independent. We'll see how that works.
Yeah, well, these politicians, trying to get them out of the limelight is, like trying to get a duck out of a pond or something. I mean, it's just not going to happen very easily. Well, Phil, we're talking about, of course, Charlie Crist running as an independent, and of course a lot of the media has been around Marco Rubio pushing him out of the Republican primary. There's some comment about Mr. Meek running on the Democrat side, but of course we're proud to have a Libertarian candidate in this race for U.S. Senate. And why don't you're proudly wearing his button, so why don't you talk just a little bit about Alex Nicker, how people can find out about his campaign and even some of his recent activities.
Alex Nicker, we're very proud. This is the first time the Libertarian Party has had a U.S. Senate candidate. Hopefully first time's a charm, but we'll see. His website is www.snicker2010.com, and he's been very active recently here over in Baker County, McClenny. There was a Tea Party, and he spoke at it, and he was very dominant, actually. There was some Marco Rubio stickers, but he got a standing ovation. He had a very professional team of people helping him out. They passed out literature to everybody, and everybody was impressed, and I think he's going to get a lot of votes out of that county.
That's fantastic. That contact information for him again?
It's www.snicker, and his last name is spelled S-N-I-T-K-E-R, snicker2010.com. And it's actually the most active U.S. Senate candidate website right now. He's getting more hits than Marco Rubio, Meeks, or Crist. So we have a real shot. People are interested in hearing his message.
Yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. We've talked about before on this show that a lot of times third-party politics is not the fast track in terms of riches, reward, or electoral success, but it is so important to have quality candidates like Alex out there explaining to people what libertarianism would look like applied to real-world problems. I mean, what a libertarian, political structure would look like, what libertarian political solutions would look like. So he's serving such an important role for us, in that regard. Absolutely.
Also, I think having him out there, even if he doesn't win, the more votes he gets, like I have people say, I want to vote for Republican or Democrat because of, who's going to win, and I'm like, you don't understand. If you think the Republican or Democrat's going to win, but you want them to apply liberty principles, if Alex gets a whole bunch of votes, they will go ahead and they'll apply those principles just to keep their job. So go ahead, support the Republican by voting Libertarian.
Yeah, I like that. I like the ring to that.